Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be having a look at September's exceptional story, A Nest in the Eaves. As always, at the start of a new exceptional story, I encourage you to play these yourself. There are spoilers ahead. Help support Failbetter, become an exceptional friend. Get access to these stories, extra cards in your deck, and more actions, and various other little benefits. But without further ado, let's jump in. The starved influence. London has become preoccupied with the starved, those strange, stretched creatures. Some, these days, call them men who live on the roof. They are at once feared and admired, not so much for what they do as for the ideas they spread. Fascination today is focused on the starved mystic, whose teachings offer relief from the cares of life in the city. Although her methods are whispered to be extreme, many seek an audience with her. Why might you be amongst them? Two options. We desire her help. The cares of life in the city weigh heavily on you. Or we are curious. Who is this mystic? And what did she learn on the roof? I am a curious sort, so we're going to go with curiosity. There is so little known about the roof, and the colonies that have watched the Neath from above long before the fall. Even a person who has spent time amongst the stalactites could not hope to understand the peculiarities of all ceiling dwellers. That the starved mystic has descended to London to share her perspective is of interest in itself, though her motives are as yet unclear. Besides, there is something intriguing about the reported extremity of her methods. Seeking an audience with the mystic would not commit you to following them. Invitations to the starved mystic's gatherings are difficult to come by. If you wish to attend, you will need to make your interest known. There are places in London where discussion of starved matters is particularly fervent. Should you involve yourself, word would surely travel. Ooh, there's quite a lot of options here. I guess I'm going to have to go to all of them. But we can visit a salon. The starved are causing society some concern. We can mingle with the bohemians, our starved ideas inspiring great art. We can attend a lecture on the ontological implications of the starved war. The events that followed the London Horticultural Show challenged academic assumptions. Or we can consort with the revolutionaries. Starved ideas might be fueling their activities. Well, let's start with the bohemians. Beneath the rafters of a candle-lit loft, the bohemians sit on the floor around a young woman who lately returned from the roof. She was profoundly changed by her time living amongst the starved. In an attempt to express this, she regales the collective with an epic poem written in a single feverish burst on the dirigible ride back to London. Her work is dreadful, but beneath the florid metaphors and tortured rhyme scheme is a sincere account of the experience of having one's understanding of the world entirely reshaped. Oh, we've moved to Vale Garden. What a rather fabulous headband. There is a collective sigh of awe, perhaps relief, as the young poet at last concludes her epic. Someone uncorks a bottle of wine, and conversation turns to the transformative effects of travel to the roof. A man in a billowing shirt pours himself a glass and settles himself beside the poet. If you could produce something like that after living among the starved, he says, prodding her in the arm, imagine what I could write. He takes a swig. I shall book passage on a dirigible tomorrow. Ooh, so we can either encourage his journey to the roof. The change in perspective would no doubt do him good. or we can advise against the venture. It is extremely dangerous up there. No art is worth such risk. I'm going to encourage him. Good luck. Exactly, exclaims the billow-shirted bohemian, sloshing wine onto the wax-stained floorboards. Down here in London, our perception is constrained not only by our roles in society, but... He leans in closely, so that you can smell the wine on his breath. By our bodies. Of course, we all think the same. We've all got one nose and 4 limbs. Well, not me. Not for much longer. I'm going to the roof. He gesticulates, knocking over a candle. I'm going to get shaped, and I'm going to compose the greatest poem ever written. Interesting. Someone clears their throat and begins to read from a battered notebook. But after the young poet's epic, the audience's attention cannot be held by an ode to a mushroom. They begin to whisper amongst themselves. I can give an account of an atypical trip to the roof? Because I have been there before in the exceptional story written in Glim. I don't know if that one's on the channel. I think it is. If it is, it's in the playlist. Let's give the account. It may inspire a great work. Perhaps your journey was not representative of what these intrepid poets might see, should they venture to the ceiling. Not all starved men give people as offerings to the false stars, you acknowledge. Nevertheless, your account inspires both fear and wonder. Once you have finished, a young man presses a notebook into your hands. It's only a first draft, he says, but I really think it has something. None of my other readers have really understood it, but after everything you've seen, I think you might. Oh, we got a journal of infamy. The poetry continues to drift over the heads of the increasingly cephalic audience. I suppose it is impressive, says one woman, a pained expression on her face. Just how many things it is possible to compare to a mushroom. Let's leave this gathering. There is a limit to how much poetry one can listen to of an evening. Rhyming couplets echo down the rickety stairwell as you make your way back to the street. Let's go see society next. The starved fad cannot end soon enough, declares the hostess. Why, just this week I saw a man with at least 5 legs. Although a starved body must be frightfully inconvenient for one's tailor, interjects a mustached gentleman. It can be reverted, more or less. But that makes it worse, protests the hostess. There are people walking around London right now who look respectable, but who have in fact done something utterly bizarre. If people wish to visit the roof and stretch themselves, they're welcome to do so, but they can't expect to be welcomed back into society. We've moved to Ladybones Road. I suppose one's body is one's own business, concedes the hostess after some cajoling from her guests. But I simply cannot fathom why one would wish to shape one's body as the starved do. If 4 limbs are good enough for us, she casts her gaze over her taffeta-clad guests, they should be good enough for... She trails off. Well, she continues, you know what I mean. So we have 2 options here. We can say we do not, in fact, know what she means. She wears a corset and a pince-nez. How does shaping differ from such means of altering the function and appearance of one's body? Or we can interpret her comment in good faith. Most Londoners, regardless of rank or station, have no need to alter themselves in such a manner. I will take it on good faith. Precisely, says the hostess, placing her teacup back on the saucer with more force than necessary. And besides, even if one did wish, or even need, to alter oneself beyond the bounds of what is respectable, well, she smooths her taffeta gown with a trembling hand. It is nevertheless one's responsibility not to do so. Resigning oneself to one's form and situation is just the price we must all pay for preserving society, even if it might cause us discomfort. It's a very, disconnected response, I feel, but she means well. A sombre atmosphere descends over the salon as the discussion draws to a close. It has been a diverting visit. The hostess stands in the hall to bid her guests farewell. There is something agitated in her manner that was not there earlier. Her eyes flick across each guest's features, their brow and nose and jaw, as if scrutinizing them for some concealed truth. Okay, let's attend a lecture on the ornithological implications of the Starved War. Though ostensibly on the topic of philosophy, much of the lecture recounts the starved invasion of London. The academics' expressions are haunted as they listen to how the starved reshaped the city, transmuting its streets to flesh and sinew, and the river to blood and fat. The taxonomic and ontological implications of this are vast, declares the lecturer. Though London is largely back to the way it was, the questions we are left with cannot be easily dismissed. Is London one huge creature? Does that make us but cells under a microscope, tiny constituent parts to a vast whole? The lecturer steps back from the lectern, opening the floor for discussion. An academic asserts that we were always just infinitesimally small and dispensable parts of a vast whole, that the transmutation of London merely alerted us to the fact. It is only as parts of something larger than ourselves that our existences have meaning. As individuals, we are utterly insignificant. We can either voice our agreement, we are like cells in a body, ants in a nest, or that is nonsense. Have academic standards fallen so precipitously that we must countenance such a proposition? I'm going to go with this is nonsense, because although we are part of something larger, individuals are not utterly insignificant. Individuals can change the course of history. A murmur of agreement ripples through the lecture theatre. For most of the academics present, the idea that one's individual actions are meaningless undermines their every thesis. We cannot simply disregard the philosophical foundations upon which civilization is built, remarks an aged professor. But did we not have to do so when London first fell? Interjects a student. That is entirely different, says the professor. The fall alerted us to truths that have always existed, but been hitherunto obscured to us. The Starved War merely imposed a temporary state upon London. It has since been resolved, and should thus be consigned to history. As the argument becomes more heated, it loses coherence, and the academics begin to conflate their lives with their work. But no one's publication is significant in and of itself, pipes up a student from the back of the lecture theatre. Any given thesis is merely part of a corpus of research, is it not? He is pelted with balled up pieces of paper. We can recount our memories of the Starved War. This is something I didn't do on my channel, but it was an event, a world event, where all players of Fallen London took actions to fight against an invasion of the starved men. Let's recollect that fact. You recall London's appearance after the starved army had shaped the city into viscera, and paraphrase the starved lithorager's description of how the invaders viewed the citizenry, as the blood in its veins, as the cells in its body. Some of the academics discuss the implications of this and admit that defining the limits of any given organism, including a person, is not as simple as they previously thought. However, others simply become more militant in their determination to define things in relation to other things. The debate devolves into an argument that rests on the unsteady premise that the university itself is an organism. Is it a parasite that feeds on London, or is the relationship symbiotic? Which academic departments correspond to which organs? Fundamental ontological questions about the nature of being are unlikely to be answered today. Well, let's leave. Your presence is not inspiring fruitful discussion. Howls of desertion echo down the streets as you walk away from the lecture theatre. And finally, let's consort with the revolutionaries. Starved ideas might be fueling their activities. You shoulder your way into a revolutionary meeting. There is no agenda, no one in charge, but the whispers that brought everyone to this basement concerned the starved. Just how resilient are their stretched bodies? Could one stop an explosion? How might starved ideas further the revolutionary cause? A few starved are in attendance, their angular bodies hunched above the crush of people. You loiter near a cluster of revolutionaries interrogating one of them. "When your body changed," says one, eyeing the collection of arms erupting from the starved man's chest, "did it make you want to change other things too?" The starved man no longer has a mouth, but since the revolutionaries are less concerned with his ideas than their own, it does not matter that he cannot reply. "Changing your body is a revolutionary act," declares a young woman, holding one of the starved man's many hands aloft. "You didn't accept the way things were, and you changed it. You're one of us." Starved man's jaw resembles a snow plough on front of a train. His expression is unreadable. So I can either agree with the young revolutionary, the starved have liberated themselves from their original form, or we can contradict her. It is reductive to equate the revolutionary cause with the act of shaping. I'm going to contradict. The revolutionaries deflate a little in response to your statement. "Shaping's still useful though," says one in an attempt to rally his comrades. "Especially since the constables and the bourgeoisie and the rest of the oppressors aren't going to do it. Can you imagine all those fine ladies going to a salon with 6 arms? It's not going to happen. But we're prepared to do it, and when the revolution finally comes and we take to the streets, there'll be no match for us." The revolutionaries fruitlessly interrogate the starved man about exactly how far shaping can be taken. Is one limited by the size of one's existing skeleton? Now this is our pilgrimage. With the monks, I can't remember their name, but it's part of the Evolution storyline, which is a series on my channel. Again, if you haven't seen it, very good. It's a standalone story that spans like 7 parts. It's crazy. It went on for months. You've witnessed how far shaping can be pushed. You witness things on a pilgrimage. While you do not divulge every detail of your pilgrimage, your description of Godfall enthralls the revolutionaries. In their wildest imaginings, they did not think it was possible to stretch a body to such limits. They posit that with the necessary resources, their body could become war machines. As the conversation devolves into a discussion about how many such bodies would be needed to attack the bazaar, a revolutionary who has remained quiet up until this point pulls you aside. She went to Godfall too. She saw things she thought no one would believe. She knows you will understand. The discussion turns to the practicalities of shaping and the risks of attempting it without an experienced practitioner. The consensus is that whatever the risks, they must be worth it. You leave the stifling basement as the revolutionaries begin interrogating the starved man about whether his plough-shaped jaw still contains teeth. Okay, an envelope falls through my letterbox. The paper inside is cheap and the ink has bled, but the scratchy writing is still legible. The starved mystic has at last invited you to one of her gatherings. Well, let's take up the starved mystic on her invitation. Evidently, she believes your interest is sincere. You follow the address on the invitation to a genteelly decrepit house. At the door, you are greeted by a robed acolyte who gently places two of his hands on your arm and leads you inside. The air is thick with incense. Someone places a cup of mushroom tea in your hands. Most people are wearing robes, which make it difficult to tell who amongst them is starved. One by one, they waft up the stairs. You follow, emerging into a parlour where the starved mystic sits on the rug, her many limbs folded beneath her. Acolytes sit at her clawed feet. The starved mystic silently surveys her acolytes from beneath the hood of her robe. Every now and again, she adjusts the folds of fabric with the fingernails at the end of her antennae. Her eyes are the size of saucers. So there's 3 people here. There's a wounded track layer. He watches the starved mystic intently. An erstwhile poet. He has something to say. Or he can sit beside the starved woman. Perhaps she can still talk. It is unclear. Speak with the wounded track layer. "I can't go back to how I was before," murmurs the wounded track layer, not taking his gaze from the starved mystic. "Something happened to me in the hinterlands." He tugs at his cap, revealing a ragged scar. "Things aren't the way you think. We're just parasite crawling around inside a body that doesn't care what happens to us. Even if we hurt it, even if we kill it, it'll just become something else, and we'll be swept away and forgotten forever." He looks at you for the first time. There's a freedom in knowing that, and it's the only freedom we've got. I don't think I've ever been to the hinterlands. It's part of the railway storyline that I still haven't done. Oh dear, it's only been 2 years or so, don't worry about it. Let's listen to the erstwhile poet. He has something to say. "I wanted to use my words to capture life as I alone understood it," says the poet. "So I went to the roof in search of experiences that would be uniquely mine. I remember the journey, leaning out of the dirigible, gazing up at the false stars, then racing back to my cabin to write." He smiles. "But then I arrived, and I realized my subjectivity never existed, let alone mattered. We are all the same, driven by urges innate to all of us. There's nothing I could write that you don't already know, deep down." I threw my poetry into the Z. And finally, let's sit beside the starved woman. The bony tarsomeres of the starved woman's arm rattle as she places a spiny hand on your shoulder. "It's all right," says the nervous man beside her. "She's welcoming you." Her mandibles rattle excitedly. She wants to say." He looks uncertainly at his companion. "That she used to hate how unfair London is, but now she understands, since we're all just small parts of something large. It doesn't matter that some people have things and others don't. No one thinks it's unfair that your hand has fingers while your stomach has none." His starved friend vibrates with approval. Let's listen to the starved mystic, who wishes to address the gathering. "Welcome," says the starved mystic, enunciating clearly despite her mandibles. "Some of the faces I see here before me are new. Some I have seen before, and some have changed since I saw them last. Swivels her eyes to survey the gathering. I invited you, she says, but do not think of me as a leader. A brain sends signals to the rest of the body, but is still made of flesh and blood. We are all matter, regardless of the form that matter takes. The truly enlightened have no desire for power. I do not claim to know what is best for the vast organism of which we are all a part, says the starved mystic. What I offer is not instruction, but liberation from concern for your individual person. It is only then that you can know what bliss of surrendering yourself to something greater. It is only then that you can know the bliss of surrendering yourself to something greater. He surveys the room. These concepts are not easily understood. Please, speak with me if you wish. Her gaze rests on you. And speak with the starved mystic. She makes great claims. You are more resistant to certain ideas than most, says the starved mystic, rearranging her many limbs to make room for you on the rug. But there seems to be something about shaping that intrigues you, she says, resting a claw on your knee. Your journey into a new way of being is just beginning. She continues and reaches into her robe to withdraw a small leather pouch. When I am meditating on transcendental matters, I like to hold these in what has become of my hands. They have a coalescing effect on the thoughts. One cannot transcend individualism through thought alone, says the starved mystic. One has to change one's entire way of life, and that cannot be done in London. She fixes her bulging eyes on yours. There is a colony on the roof where it is possible. I would like you to accompany me there. Okay, well, how did she discover this colony, and what is it like? I once worked upon a dirigible, says the starved mystic, for Mr. Fires. Hard, cruel work. Instead of sleeping, I paced the deck, my body bruised, cursing the circumstances that put my fate in the hands of a master. She sighs, the air whistling through her mandibles. I might have stayed that way, had the dirigible not crashed into a stalactite. I was the only survivor. I climbed for days, avoiding false stars, and eventually found the colony. There I learned to live as part of something larger than myself. I understood that my own situation, my own pain, they do not matter. Never did. How did she become this way? It is unusual to see Londoners with quite so many limbs. I underwent the shapling arts, replied the starved mystic. I am still comprised of the same volume of bone and flesh as before, but it has been rearranged. Uniquely so. This particular technique requires not just amber, but tools of infernal origin, and is only performed at the colony I wish to take you to. If you come with me, you may undergo it too, if you wish. She casts her gaze about the room. Most people I have taken to the roof allow their bodies to revert before they return to London, but some stay as they are. It helps them remember what they have learned. How can she afford such a house? She and her acolytes are on the fringes of society. It is not true that the only people who yearn for liberation are the uncomfortable and the downtrodden, says the starved mystic. Believing in the paramount importance of one's own fate will lead to despair regardless of one's situation. He runs a claw through the opulent rug. It would have been easy for our benefactors to continue to live as they did, believing themselves above others. It was more difficult for them to relinquish their situation than it was for me. Some are here, and some remain on the roof, but none are as they were. Does she feel responsibility to the people at this gathering? They revere her. That gives her power. I wish it were not so, says the starved mystic, but there are some who still long to be led. It is a symptom of having lived so long under mayors and masters and empresses. If they come with me to the roof, they will understand that power is not simply a matter of who follows and who leads. We are bound together by more than hierarchy. She casts her lidless eyes about the room. Nevertheless, most here do not understand that yet. Their trust is a heavy weight to bear. He gave me some money. Nice. I have enjoyed speaking with you, says the starved mystic, and I hope you will accompany me to the roof. There are things that cannot be explained, only experienced. Gives you an address and tells you when the airship leaves. If you decide to come, she says, as you get to your feet, you do not need to bring anything, merely your open mind. You shall bid her farewell. The starved mystic watches as you pick your way through the pulled robes of the seated acolytes. The scent of incense and mushroom tea follows you out of the house. The story continues on a starved pilgrimage, anywhere in London. But I do believe I shall be ending this first episode here. I am in this story. I really like the way this is written, the way it's presented, and it intrigues me, and I want to do more. So we shall have to see. But thank you all very much for watching. Please like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. Thank you again to the members of the channel and the coffee supporters. It really does help me keep making these videos. And as always, I'll see you next time.